Usually when you think about like a stalled engine, the problem is incredibly obvious. You sit in the driver's seat, you turn the key, you hear that pathetic, that dry clicking sound, and you immediately know the battery is dead.
Yeah, it's a clean mechanical failure. You just diagnose it, swap the part, and the machine runs again.
Exactly. But when you step into the world of human motivation, the diagnostics become, well, incredibly murky. I mean, that stalled engine isn't under the hood of a car. It's your entire life.
Right.
It's your business. It's your ability to wake up and just move forward, especially after, a profound personal tragedy.
Which is the absolute paralyzing definition of inertia.
Yeah.
And getting that human machinery moving again, it requires a very specific, almost violent kind of spark. It really requires an understanding of force.
And that is exactly the problem a financial planner named Ben Hod ran into. To fix his stalled life and business after an unimaginable personal loss, he didn't turn to, modern therapy or standard self-help.
No, he went in a completely different direction.
He really did. He actually turned to the esoteric 19th century French occultism of a man named Eliphas Lévy. And today in this deep dive, we are taking the School of High Magic curriculum that Ben curated from those ancient texts for a free private Facebook group. And we are figuring out how high magic is actually a highly practical, gritty toolkit for getting unstuck.
It's fascinating, really.
And we're going to see how you can take these concepts and apply them directly to your own life. Because he even capped off this whole curriculum with an original song.
Which is wild. But when you look closely at Levy's work, the mission here isn't about waving wands or, doing parlor tricks.
Right, no pulling rabbits out of hats.
Exactly. When you strip away that dense Victorian prose, he's laying out a mechanical methodology for self-mastery. It is a system built for those moments when you are staring down the barrel of grief or, frankly, total stagnation.
Okay, let's unpack this baseline philosophy first, because Lévy has a very specific view of the universe. He doesn't see it as this grand, poetic battleground of moral good versus evil.
No, he sees it as a literal site of energetic conversion. It's all mechanical friction.
Right. On one side, you have what he calls liberty, which stems from a Latin root implying a state of being completely unconditioned. It's this self-determining proactive fire.
And on the other side, you have the vis inertia.
The vis inertia, yeah.
Yeah.
The heavy, lazy tendency of matter to just remain at rest.
To really grasp this, you have to consider the era Lévy was writing in. I mean, this is 19th century Europe, right in the heart of the Industrial Revolution.
Oh, sure. Steam engines everywhere.
Exactly. Society is suddenly obsessed with steam, iron, gears, thermodynamics. So Lévy looks at the universe and decides that matter is fundamentally lazy.
It just wants to sleep.
It wants to sleep. It resists any attempt by the spirit to organize it. So magic, in this context, is an industrial force. You aren't closing your eyes and praying for a miracle.
You are acting as, a hydraulic press of the spirit.
That's a great way to put it. You are pushing against the universe's vegetative slumber to carve out a space for your own existence.
And to bring this abstract 19th century philosophy into stark modern reality, we have to look at the baseline of Ben Hod's life and the tragedy that disrupted it.
Yeah, we need to be really clear about the loss here because it frames everything that follows.
Okay, let's unpack this because the sources clarify a really crucial detail. The end-of-life care that derailed his year, it was for his best friend who was also the mother of his child.
Right.
They are the exact same person.
We need to pause and just acknowledge the sheer crushing gravity of that. I mean, losing a partner and your closest confidant simultaneously.
While trying to parent a child who just lost their mother.
The psychological weight of that alone is enough to permanently stall any human being.
It is devastating. And the timeline the sources lay out is crucial to understanding how that vis inertia took hold of his professional life. Because Ben's actual leave of absence to care for her and to actively grieve was only 2 months.
Only 2 months on paper.
Right. But his entire year was severely impacted because he couldn't be in the office regularly. And on top of that, he lacked office support staff for about 6 months of that time.
Wow. 6 months without support.
Yeah. So the business was completely unanchored. When he finally returns to his financial practice full-time, he is staring at a completely stagnant business ledger. It is a literal numerical manifestation of that lazy matter Lévy talks about.
What's fascinating here is how a grieving person approaches that chaotic battlefield. If we look at the internal psychological mechanism, Ben didn't sit on a cushion, meditate for hours, and just try to accept the poor numbers.
Right, he doesn't just surrender to it.
No, he applies his active force, what Levy calls the astral light, directly to the noise of his business pipeline. He gets on the phone. He applies his service model. He actively forces the confusion of matter into alignment with reason.
I like to think of it like a spark plug in a stalled engine. I mean, without that deliberate, aggressive strike of the spark, the heavy machinery of the world will simply swallow you back into unconscious nature.
That's spot on. But striking that spark once is relatively easy. Anybody can make one phone call and a burst of motivation, you know?
Yeah, totally. The real question is, how do you keep the engine running when the sheer weight of grief and those trailing metrics are constantly trying to crush you back down?
That brings us to Levy's central metaphor for surviving the friction of existence. He looks at the physical laws of the universe, gravity, biology, the slow pace of change, and yes, tragedy and grief.
And he compares all of these natural laws to a giant, merciless millstone.
Right. It is constantly turning, constantly grinding.
Levy sets up this brilliant, stark dichotomy here. If you remain passive, which, by the way, the source's note actually comes from the Latin word patiens, meaning one who suffers or endures.
Right, a patient.
Exactly. If you remain passive, you are the grain. You are this soft, unformed substance destined to be pulverized by the friction of that turning millstone.
But the alternative is to be the miller.
To control the machinery.
Exactly. To be the miller means stepping outside that grinding process. You understand the mechanics of the wheel, you understand where the mechanical advantage lies, and you control the feed.
And the sources show how Ben applied this upon returning to his practice. Instead of submitting to the emotional distress of those poor performance reports, which would be, the consciousness of the grain.
Letting the numbers crush him into despair.
Right. Instead of that, he viewed the stagnant ledger as merely a seized gear in a three-part machine. Activity, conversion, and result.
If the result is bad, you don't weep over the gear. You apply the mechanical reapplication of will to the input. He treated his business like an engine that just needed a new spark.
But wait, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Isn't referring to deep, profound human suffering, like losing the mother of your child and watching your livelihood stall, as just being caught in the machinery without a plan? Isn't that an incredibly cold way to view life?
I can see why it feels that way.
It feels almost devoid of empathy, honestly.
Well, our modern sensibilities definitely expect a softer touch. We're very used to a culture of profound validation. But Levy's framework, written in an era obsessed with steam and iron, is an exercise in spiritual jujitsu.
Spiritual jujitsu.
Yeah, it's a masterclass in the redirection of force. It's not coldness. The sage doesn't try to break the laws of physics, because to break the millstone would mean you stop producing flour.
You stop living.
Exactly. Instead, the sage uses that heavy gravitational pull to rotate the gears of their own liberation. Suffering, in this occult framework, happens when you don't know how the machine works.
Okay, I see. So to master this massive external millstone of life, Levy says you first have to completely master your internal machinery.
You have to chain the beasts.
Right. He introduces the four elements as the quaternary of the human soul. This is often represented in ancient art as a sphinx or a tetramorph. You've got air, which is the eagle or the intellectual mind.
Then water, the man, which is emotion and speech.
Earth, the bull, representing physical inertia and labor. And fire, the lion, which is untamed desire.
The text states that the initiate must violently conquer and chain these symbolic beasts to achieve sovereignty. The alchemists called this the fixatio, the stabilization of the volatile.
Let me make sure I, and you listening, really get how this translates to a modern setting. Because chaining a symbolic beast sounds very dramatic.
It's very 19th century occult.
Yeah. But if I'm looking at a modern workplace or home, an unchained eagle of the intellect, that's the person who endlessly reads self-help books or doom scrolls Wikipedia at 3 a.m, but never actually cleans their room or finishes a project, right?
That is a perfect modern translation. The intellect is flying, but it's completely divorced from will.
And an unchained lion of desire.
That's the person snapping at their coworkers because they are frustrated or just, skip lunch.
Angry, basically.
Exactly. And an unchained bull is stubborn laziness, refusing to adapt to a new software system because it's too much effort. If you don't establish a perimeter of will, your intellect flies into useless abstraction, your emotions flood your logic, and your labor becomes incredibly clumsy.
And to explain the ideal state of this chained soul, Levy points to two extreme literary benchmarks, Faust and Job.
Two very different figures.
Very. You need the audacious wisdom of Faust, the guy who realizes standard exoteric data isn't enough and aggressively seeks forbidden knowledge. But you need that hunger without his reactive desperation.
And on the flip side, you need the imperturbability of Job. The Greek term for this is ataraxia.
Job loses his family, his health, his wealth. Total chaos.
Yet his soul does not sustain a single crack. Job represents the crystalline, unbreakable strength of the center, while Faust represents the relentless hunger for expansion and action.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How does a modern listener possibly balance the aggressive hunger of Faust with the passive, crystalline patience of Job?
It sounds impossible.
It does. If I try to be intensely ambitious and totally at peace with losing everything at the exact same time, I'm going to suffer complete psychological whiplash.
Well, holding that contradiction is the entire point. It's the core of Levy's concept of dynamic equilibrium. The initiate has to become a chimeric monstrosity.
A monstrosity.
Yeah, you have to be grounded in the mud of reality, but soaring in the ether. You possess the fire of the seeker, but also the granite stability of the sufferer. You don't pick one. You hold the agonizing tension between those extremes. You become the Sphinx.
But maintaining that tension feels nearly impossible because of what Levy calls the whirlwinds of vague thoughts.
The constant danger of being capricious.
Exactly. The sources mention the word capricious is actually related to the Italian word capriccio, which refers to the unpredictable, frisky, twitchy movements of a goat.
It's reacting to every little stimulus like an exposed nerve.
Which leads directly into his metaphor of the donkey. Levy references the donkey of Lawrence Sterne in Tristram Shandy, representing botched potential and accidental, clumsy living.
He also references Apuleius in The Golden Ass, where a character's unchecked lust literally traps his soul in the flesh of a beast of burden.
So the donkey represents our raw, unrefined astral force, our base habits.
If you're listening to this right now, think about your own donkey.
Yeah, what is the raw, instinctual habit you retreat to when you're stressed? Is it picking fights on the internet? Is it pouring a drink the second work gets hard?
The ultimate question Levy poses is, are you its master or are you its servant? And mastering it requires navigating what Levy controversially refers to as the feminine attractions.
Right. Let's slow down and tackle this, because Levy gets into some very 19th century language here about the Sphinx having womanly breasts, and he challenges the reader to resist the attractions of women.
We have to handle this carefully.
Totally. To be entirely clear, we're looking at this strictly as an occult, technical manual on the economy of energy. This isn't about modern social dynamics or gender politics.
No, we have to read it hermeneutically. In the Hermetic tradition, the feminine represents the chaotic, receptive astral currents, what's sometimes called the ob. Think of the ob as the constant magnetic pull of the world's noise. The distractions, the drama, the consumerism. It's an ontological test of your internal polarity.
So resisting external magnetism preserves your internal battery.
Yes, which occultists call the vril. Every single time you succumb to an external attraction without conscious intent, you leak a finite amount of energy from your vessel.
It reminds me of a modern analogy to explain Levy's core aphorism. To be able to do and to abstain from doing is to be twice able.
That's a powerful quote.
It really is. Think of having $1 million high-performance sports car. True power isn't flooring the accelerator at every single green light.
No, any idiot can push a pedal.
Right. True power is having that engine roaring, totally capable of doing 200 miles an hour, but possessing the absolute ironclad discipline to keep the car in neutral. The vacuum of will you create by abstaining is what actually draws the world to you.
The friction on the brake pads in your sports car scenario is exactly what Levy means by holding the tension. It's the conscious capacity to contain the force rather than just mechanically expending it the second you feel an urge.
So if you're just giving in constantly,
if you are governed by the pull of your own dopamine or your anger or your grief, you aren't an actor in your own life. You are just a reaction. You're the grain. To possess power is to be the conscious director of the current.
This brings us to the ultimate stakes of this entire philosophy, because Levy completely redefines what it means to be a coward.
It's a very striking redefinition.
In his view, it's not someone who is afraid of a dark alley or a physical threat. A coward is someone who neglects their moral dignity to blindly obey their natural biological instinct.
Survival comfort instinct.
Right. Fleeing a threat is only considered shameful in this framework because it means the animal body is dictating terms to the eternal spirit.
The spirit should be the master. Honor, conversely, is defined by Levy as the universal presentiment of immortality. It's choosing your higher duty, your deliberate will, over your biological attractions and fears.
The sources talk about how ancient initiations were designed specifically to forge this sovereign will. Like Pythagoras demanded 5 years of total silence from his students.
Not to punish them, but to build a massive psychic reservoir, teaching the initiate to hold power without leaking it through idle chatter or complaints.
And the Egyptians had intense physical trials based on the elements. But Levy laments that the modern directors of consciences, meaning the clergy and leaders of his day, have lost the keys to this laboratory.
The path of the light had been lost. Seekers are left with empty moralism, people just telling them to be good instead of teaching them the actual technologies of the soul to withstand tragedy.
So what does this all mean for us? What are you, the everyday listener, supposed to do with this heavy mandate? I mean, we don't exactly have Egyptian hierophants walking us through hidden temples to build our psychic reservoirs anymore.
Thankfully not.
Right. So if I want to apply high magic to my life tomorrow morning, what is the actual initiation?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the modern initiation is refusing to be a slave to second causes. True life requires a philosophical death of the ego. To overcome yourself is to learn to live.
Break down a second cause for me.
A second cause is anything in the world that makes you react rather than act. The economy tanks, so you panic and sell your investments. That's a second cause.
Okay, got it.
Your partner snaps at you because they are tired, so you immediately snap back. Second cause. If you hit a dog and it bites you, the dog is a slave to a second cause. It has no choice but to bite.
It's just biology.
Exactly. Human initiation is stepping out of that reactive loop. It is putting a buffer of sheer will between the stimulus and the response and choosing to become a first cause in your own life. You initiate the action.
Which brings us right back to Ben Hod. He encapsulates this entire dense 19th century curriculum into his modern life, and he distilled it into that original song I mentioned called I'm the Miller.
He took the ultimate second cause, the tragedy of losing his child's mother, and forced himself to become a first cause again.
The lyrics he wrote are incredibly visceral. They capture that psychological transition from grain to Miller perfectly. He writes, "World turns like a rusted wheel, cold steel under aching heels."
And he goes on, 12 months gone, the line went cold, late nights with a heavy name, old grief in a picture frame. It shows the profound emotional weight of the vis inertia he was dealing with. He isn't ignoring the pain, he's naming it.
And then the chorus hits, and it's pure active force. He sings, "I'm the miller, I'm the flame, I won't be the grain again. Move the stone, break the chain, turn the weight into my name. I'm the pressure, I'm the spark. I make motion from the dark."
It's just so powerful.
It really is. It's taking that stalled engine we talked about at the very beginning, opening the hood and striking the spark yourself.
He recognized the heavy, grinding machinery he was caught in, the loss, the absence, the stagnant business, and instead of letting it crush him into dust, he chose to grab the wheel. He refused to let his tragedy reduce him to a slave of second causes.
So we leave you with this final thought. Look at your own life right now. If the physical world is a merciless millstone and your natural impulses, your bad habits, and even your external tragedies are just second causes trying to push you around, what is one specific area in your life right now where you need to stop acting like the grain, step outside the machinery, and finally grab the wheel as the miller?
World turns like a rusted wheel, cold steel under aching heels. Dust sits on the office phone, 12 months gone, the line went cold. Late nights with a heavy name, old grief in a picture frame, metric stare.